Hey, David Raffoff here. Hope you're having a good day. Thought it would be interesting to just revisit a talk that I've watched again recently, kind of cover that here. Um, there's an author and speaker who I really like, Sandi Metz, who has a talk from the 2015 RailsConf called Nothing is Something. And it's not really Rails or Ruby specific. It's something that applies to pretty much anybody doing programming, especially I would say object-oriented programming. Although all the same ideas kind of apply to functional programming. You can just get yourself in more trouble, I think, on the object-oriented side if you're not familiar with these ideas. So anyway, the reason that I kind of revisit it is it's one of those talks that really kind of makes you rethink just how, or for me at least, maybe kind of rethink like how I organize code in general, and like how often how often I like inadvertently repeat things because uh, there's a lot of places where there are concepts and programs that don't have names yet. And if you don't recognize that it's something that needs a name or needs to be like treated as um, a concept in your program, that you're just going to kind of like keep repeating special case handling of it all over the place. So kind of the most obvious example of it is this thing you'll run into with like nulls or just like null references. So if you think about it, this is just totally pulling something out of the air, but if you had a program for some reason where you wanted to go through and look at a bunch of people who each may or may not have a bank account, but you want to like print out a report of how much money they have, somehow you're gonna have to figure out how to handle the situation where people don't have bank accounts. And a really common way to do that is just like anywhere you need to check like a balance on the bank account, you would do some kind of special handling for like not having a bank account. So it'd be like if there is a bank account, call bank account.balance, otherwise do some other thing. The problem is if you do it that way, you're going to end up with that special case like anywhere you need to check for a balance in your system. So if you're writing like a billing system or something like that, you may end up with 10 or 100 or 1,000 of those references pretty easily. And the problem just gets worse the more messages or questions or calls or whatever you want to whatever like the API is of the bank account, the more things it knows about that you can ask it about. The problem is just going to keep showing up anywhere you need to ask bank account about something. So, and the talk's called Nothing is Something, and it starts off by just pointing out, this is an example of where you're missing a concept in your system, where you can do something like create a null bank account that can answer all the questions a normal bank account could answer, and it just has some kind of say for like using balance as example, if you asked a null bank account what its balance is, it might give you 0.00, or it might give you like a string that's like NA for like not applicable, but it's in one place and you can use that null object like anywhere you care about bank accounts, and just ask it what its balance is, and you don't have to like do a special case handling for null. And one way to make that easier is she suggests using something that's like guaranteed bank account. So you would have a helper. Maybe you would send you can have a helper that basically will either return a real bank account if somebody has one, or like a null bank account if they don't. And if you do that in one place, then from that point on, all you have to do is ask for like a guaranteed bank account, and then you can ask it any of the questions you want to ask it, and you don't have to do like special handling all over the place. But what's really cool with that talk is that's just the first example of a bunch of other things that kind of follow a similar pattern, where if you're not intentional about handling them, you're going to end up with like handling things as special cases all over the place in your program, or you're going to write classes that are responsible for like 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 different activities, because it's easy to fall into that trap if you don't know about some of these other techniques. And when you do that, it also makes that class like much harder to test, because you have to test all the possible combinations of outcomes for the things it's responsible for. So if you have a class that's only responsible for one thing, you can just test that one thing and see if it's doing it right. And if there's a variation within it, you can test it pretty easily, and you don't have to, like, if you had a class that was responsible for that and something else, then now you're like, having to multiply the things that you're checking in that class. And then the other nice thing about if you're really paying attention with like naming your concepts is you can realize where you have a concept in your code, like say something like ordering is kind of an easy example, where you might have a default ordering, which is just, going through the people in a list that was given to you from somewhere in order, or you may want to go through it in like random order, or you may want to like anonymize who they are when you're printing things out, or in some cases you may want to just print out their full name along with their balance. So you have these different responsibilities like ordering or how things get formatted when they're printed, and really you don't want one class that like is responsible for running the algorithm and knowing how ordering works and knowing how like printing formatting works. It'd be much better to have a class that just knows the algorithm and knows it can be given something that can handle ordering, and it can be given something that can handle formatting, and you can assume those things are already tested somewhere else, and you don't have to worry about testing them in your class. And in your class you only have to worry about running that algorithm and making sure that you're calling you're sending the messages that you're interested in from the these other like helpers or collaborators or dependencies that were injected or whatever. So anyway, that may be like getting way too into the weeds, but if you've been programming for a while and you're looking for just like good examples of how to think about organizing code, I think that the Nothing is Something talk by Sandi Metz is really great. Any of her books are really good. I think the 99 Bottles book that she made what kind of was a evolution of this talk, where she really went through it and gave some, like, started with a really concrete example and thoroughly documented like how to go through and spot these kinds of things and figure out when it makes sense to invest in making things like flexible and easier to maintain, and when it doesn't, and like how to name things well, and so that they can accommodate like additional variations of the same idea over time. Anyway, this probably all sounding very abstract, so I just encourage you to go and check out the video. If you do check it out, or if you do read one of her books, please come back and comment and just like let me know what you thought about it, even if you only made it 30 seconds into the video. I've been programming for so long, it's easy for me to kind of forget what things were like important or really helpful for me. So and also like there's a whole thing of like certain things are useful for you to know at certain points in your career, like when you kind of have to get past the absolute basics first, probably before you worry too much about how to organize stuff. But I feel like for people who are more than a year or more than a couple of years into their career, like these are the kinds of things that are really going to help accelerate your confidence in learning and just ability to write good programs. So yeah, leave me a comment on what you think after you watch it. Definitely be interested in hearing about that. And thanks for watching, and I will see you in the next one.